So Cheryl, can you tell me what have you enjoyed most about iEARN conferences?
Okay, this is my third conference, and I think what has really been special to me has been the kind of learning experiences that I have been sharing and having shared with me. Because what is important to me as a teacher educator is what I could do to improve the learning experiences of my students. When I get to my classes, I want to have something new as often as possible, and in these conferences, when I go to the sessions, there is always something in some session somewhere that I can take back to my classes. This iEARN community is a wide community of experienced persons especially, and I think the experiences are so varied that you always get something from them. That's what works for me.
What's your greatest concern as an educator, and what has iEARN done to help you?
My greatest concern has been the lack of motivation of my students, and I have experienced this at the primary level as a teacher, the secondary level, and even working with students who are what we describe as prospective teachers. Somehow the students find it very difficult to get themselves engaged in the learning activities that are prepared for them. And attached to that lack of motivation is the whole idea of maybe the lack of relevance of what they're learning, or the meaninglessness of, if meaninglessness is a good word, the lack of meaning of what they are learning. And I think my introduction to iEARN has made some sense of difference with that. And I'll give one example of a project that I was working with some students. The most recent project, it's the one day in the life project. I think that project allowed the students to share their own experiences with other students, some students from Illinois. In terms of motivation, the students were looking at what they were doing as individuals and sharing their experiences with other children who from a different culture, who were not very familiar with the kinds of things that they experience on a day-to-day basis. And individual students were sharing different experiences. Of course, in terms of the motivation for the students, it was important. I didn't teach that class particularly. I was working with another teacher. But many times what you found is that these children, when I got there, they were ready with what they had to do. If they had to write a paragraph about what happened to them as related to a particular experience, they had it ready. In terms of the motivation, I saw it. They had to have a picture to upload on the site to share with the children in the US. The pictures were there. The meaningfulness as well, in terms of what they were learning, the relevance was important, because the integration of the things that they were doing in the project was very important. It was a social studies project for the most part, but in that social studies project, I didn't have to force the students to write, because they had to write paragraphs about what they were doing as individuals in terms of the day in their life. But I didn't have to force them and say, please do your homework, bring it, write it. They knew that they had to write it because they had to type it up on the computers. That came easily for them. Then as well, other things in terms of the integration of the kinds of content. For instance, what you saw the students doing is sharing with the other students. So that somebody was having a problem uploading something, the students came to see what their friend was doing and shared with them. As well, you saw that social learning taking place, meaningful again, and the content related to the particular topic, the social studies content, learning about the things in Trinidad and Tobago. For instance, a particular child might have, that day in their life might have been about the river, spending a day by the river. It might have been about a Hindu wedding. It might have been about whatever the issue in that particular child's life. They would have been sharing, and other children in the class sharing. And of course, that content being relevant, and they are also learning about the children in Illinois and their particular experiences. So it became meaningful to them, so I didn't have to force them to learn it. The motivation was there, and you saw them interacting, being excited about it. On a day when I promised that I would come, for instance, if I told them I was coming on a Tuesday and I couldn't make it for some reason, the teacher would call to say the children are waiting, they want to know, what is happening if you're not coming again or whatever. So I felt that kind of took care of it, doing the projects and having the project
connected to their everyday life.
Connected to their everyday lives, making it meaningful, and certainly covering that motivation aspect.
So Cheryl, what do you think is the most important skill for an educator today?
I think for educators, it is important to understand the individual students who are assigned to our care and being able to meet the needs of those individual students. We have gone past the time when we can treat students as a whole, look at a class and treat everybody as one large group. And I think what we need to do is now understand the individual cases of students, and we need to make a difference in the lives of each student, a positive difference, and to take each student beyond the point where we would have met them when we get them, maybe if we have a student for a year or for 2 years. And I think that's important in terms of the emotional, social, spiritual, all of the aspects of life that would be important in the growth of students. So it's about learning. That's what we have to do. We understand that we are teachers and we have to share knowledge, but we have to teach these children in their individual cases how to access knowledge and how to use that knowledge in a positive way. And that's what I think teachers need to understand.
What do you think is the issue with large, well, not so much what do you think is the issue with large classrooms, but the challenge of having a large classroom and still giving individualized attention? Could you talk a bit about that?
In large classes, sometimes I think teachers tend to see each student as having the same issue. What we need to understand in large classes is that we need to get a sense of what are the particular issues of students as individuals, and sometimes we might be able to get smaller groups within the classes and get into some kind of differentiated learning. Maybe we can have students who have different, in terms of their socioeconomic challenges, students at different academic levels, whatever the differences may be within the classes, and at some points in time it might be feasible to treat the class as a group, and then at other times, according to what is being delivered, it might be necessary to give the small groups that kind of attention that would help them to grow. So that
group work and assigned teams.
Yes, so I think what is important is to understand your class as a whole, pay some attention to these individuals very early in the period that you have them, so that you have a sense of how the individuals need to be treated as small groups sometimes, as larger groups, maybe in pairs, however, but the individual teacher needs to address that.
Do you have specific activities that you've done that when you break students into groups that enable?
We have cooperative learning strategies that we can use. We have learning centers that we have used with students, individualized activities as well, so that it really is about the individual teacher doing his or her research and understanding what are the available kinds of activities that would work for the different kinds of activities in the classroom.
So what has iEARN offered you that you did not have before?
First, I think the large community of experienced persons and the opportunity to attend these conferences and to interact, to find out what's happening with the projects, persons to interact with as well, to work with on projects, because before iEARN, I really was not aware of these projects. It was only when I did the Teacher Education for the 21st Century course that I became aware of iEARN and aware of the large community of persons working on projects like these and the kinds of experiences that students can have. And what I have found is that they are very valuable experiences for the learners. So that I would say first and foremost the community of experience and very interested, actually, supportive and dedicated persons who want to make a difference. That's first. And then of course the range of projects that, I mean, you have such a wide choice of things if you want to get the students interested and involved, and then persons who will work with you on those projects to make a difference to the end, who will give you the kind of support. So I think that's what I would have offered in the last 3 years, because it would have been 3 years for me.